cat? This is my buddy. I think you can hear the birds outside. Yeah, he likes it in my studio. That's Mardigan, the studio cat. Welcome to the studio. This is my world. I love it. I enjoy about every part of it. Sometimes it can overwhelm me because there's so much to keep up with. But yeah, it's where I thrive. I'm going to take just a few minutes to deal with a few issues that I feel like are important and that I'm not going to touch as much as I need to in the play-alongs. First of all, colored pencils. In buying a good set of watercolor pencils, you want the pencil to be soft enough to transfer easily onto the paper. You don't want the pencil to be so soft that when you get it wet, it just disintegrates. And that can happen with some of the cheaper pencils. You want a pencil that goes on smoothly. And some pencils are so hard that when you wet them down, you still have all those lines. Now, you can learn to save the lines you want, but you want to be able to integrate those lines into your watercolor. So you want something that's blendable and something that is strong enough to put the image on, wet or dry. Dry on dry is generally used for setting on the painting, for finding your watercolor painting on the paper. Sometimes I add a dry on dry later on, but not real often. Most of the time I will dip the tip of my pencil in the clear water in my palette, and then I will draw with it. You want a pencil that absorbs just enough of that water that you can go ahead and draw with it without it falling apart. And that's what you look for. And there are plenty of pencils out there that will do that. Even when you use water to draw with in the later stages, you're going to have to take a brush to it. You just are. And so if you know that, you won't be disappointed when you look at it and you go, wow, that's bumpy. And you'll know, well, all I have to do is take a fine brush, dip it in some of the clear water or some of a wash that's the same color in some cases, and bring it over the top of that colored pencil mark. And it'll lay down, go into the paper, and you'll be just fine. Treatment of the colored pencils. When you're finished, or when you're not going to be using a pencil again for a long time in a more advanced work, or if you're not going to be using it again in that project, you'll take it out, and I demonstrated this in my last video, and you'll just rub it. You won't wipe it, you'll just rub it over the paper towel. I suggest paper towel, not a cloth for this. I use cloths in most of my painting, but in watercolor I prefer paper towels. In the other media, you will get felt off of your paper towel up into the ferrule of your brush, whole different thing. But watercolor doesn't do that because it does not have a binding agency that will do that with the paper. So I use paper towel. I like it better. I like how quickly it pulls from my pencil or my brush. I can control how much water I lose and how much I keep a lot better with a paper towel. So that's what I use on those. But before you put that pencil aside to let it dry, it's important that you blot off just the surface water on the pencil point, so that the water doesn't go down the shaft of the pencil that's still inside wood and get it broken up or somewhat damaged. You don't want that to happen. Yes, it will dry back out, but because it's a shaft and it's enclosed in there, sometimes you can get funky things going on with your watercolor pencil. So if you just kind of roll it on that paper towel, it'll take off the really wet stuff on the outside, and then you can let the rest of it dry. I do the same thing with my pans at the end of a session. You have to constantly put water in your pans while you're working. Sometimes you're taking it out of the pans and putting it into your palette to create washes, and sometimes you're just using it up. But you're going to need to fill those pans back with water on the top fairly often during a work, and you've seen me do that, so you should kind of understand that already. When you finish, that will have soaked down into the pan and wetted the watercolor in the pan. You don't want to brush it or anything like that. If you get a little paint sharing, get you a Q-tip and kind of take that away. But for taking that water off, the best thing is just go in and just blot it so that it's not standing water. Because the standing water will continue to go down into the pan and into the pan, and you'll get cracks in it as it dries. So it's much better if you just take that water right off the top, let it dry a little bit, put it up, and then it'll be ready for you to use next time. So those are some things that I don't think I really covered very well, but there they are. Traveling with watercolors. I know watercolor artists that would rather paint in the field and feel like they get a better product out in the field than they do in a studio or at their table or wherever they work. I like to paint in the field. I like to finish in the studio. But I like to go out and pull some things on there. I like the freshness. Sometimes I don't ever do anything with it. And sometimes I finish it out very detailed, after I get it back to the studio. But I like to paint in the field, and I like to take them along. Sometimes you don't know, but you want to have some art supplies along. And I'll take colored pencils. Sometimes I'll take Conte, and sometimes frequently I'll take watercolor supplies. When I go camping, when I'm going to be traveling with time and I know I'll have a place to set up, then yeah, because watercolor, you have to have a little bit of setup room. Not a lot when you're traveling. I generally don't do tubes when I'm traveling. When you start using tubes, I think you'll see it. But sometimes I use different kinds of things, and I prep my own stuff before I go, because that's kind of who I am. So I'm going to show you a few things. Hygiene boxes. This is a toothbrush box, and I've got it full of brushes. Now, I've got some brushes in here that I need to take out. I don't need 3 4 teensy tiny brushes. Maybe 1, maybe 2. So I've got a bunch of those. I've got 2 of that size, and I probably only need 1 of that size. So I could take some of these out and put in a medium filbert. Put in a larger wash brush, you know, that sort of thing, like I did the background with on the butterfly. Yeah, I could put a couple of those in here and take some of these others out. But this is a handy thing. Protects your brushes, and you can put it in. Get yourself a satchel or a really small travel bag, or a small zip case. You don't want to take humongous paper along most of the time. You just want a small watercolor pad anyway, and a zip case, like a notebook type case that you put that kind of thing in, works pretty good. These are a great addition to it. This is a soapbox, and in my soapbox I have Q-tips that want out. And I have some of these makeup pads that are great. I will almost always take some folded paper towels along in my case. Spray bottles are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And the little bitty shampoo, conditioner type bottles that you can buy, they are a great addition. And you can take a regular bottle of bottled water, cheap bottled water, along with you. And it doesn't have chemicals in it. It's filtered, and it works good. If you can get a liter, full liter, that's probably more than you're going to need. The little collapsible cups are really nice to have. And now they have these silicone cups. I don't think I have any of the silicone cups back here, but they collapse flat. And those are nice to have in the stuff that you're going with. So putting that all together and just having it where you can grab it when you go out the door is really, really kind of fun. Just grab your extra a small pad of paper, and stick it in there, and put you some of those things. Now then, I'm going to talk to you about palette. These are watercolor palettes that a student of mine used in painting a picture. This one probably had, it's got some white in it, and I don't know if you can see that white, and then it has and it probably had water in the other ones. This one probably had some water in those 3 other ones, so that I had both wash and water. I don't like to fill all 6 of the trays with different colors, because I like to have some I can pull off into make a thinner wash or something like that. I use these almost always for washing in my painting. But what you can do is you can squeeze a little bit from a tube into that. Leave these open. You've got palette for water. And do a second one. And that's going to be 6 colors. You can do 2 of them, are going to give you 12 colors. And you can do as many of them as you want and as you have. Put a rubber band around them, and then when you get where you're going, just take it apart and you can lay it out and use those as you would use watercolor trays. And it works pretty good, actually. Because these, as soon as you put water in them, they reactivate and they become watercolor again. And that's a little suggestion on traveling with them. If I take rags along, I take them just for cleaning up spells and stuff like that, and to clean up me. Because I don't generally use rags for blotting when I'm doing a watercolor painting. I teach by rote when people are getting started. I do a stroke for stroke. Make your line here, make this length of line, make this curve up here, make this curve down here. You know, I teach that way, especially with children, but even with adults who don't have a lot of development. I don't teach that way a long time. As soon as the student begins to really get how information is transferred from the eye to the paper, then I start watching the student and I start seeing what the student needs and helping the student. I usually keep a pad or something there that I can do a real quick little demonstration for my students so they can see how to do what I'm telling them to do if they're having a real struggle with it. So there's the question of resourcing your work. You've noticed that I've been putting the little block up here with the completed picture as a guide for following my process so that you can see the end process instead of putting out any kind of a pictorial resource. A lot of people, even people who don't copyright their pictures, are kind of possessive of their pictures. It's getting harder and harder to find stuff that doesn't have something that interferes with you downloading it and putting it on a file for use. That's because that really is somebody else's mental property. Do I ever use things like that? Yes, I do. I can screenshot a page with the best of them. Yeah. And then send it to my messenger and then download it on my computer and keep it in a file forever and ever. Amen. But my relationship to those resources is perhaps a little different than what some people do. Because what you need from a resource is truth. You don't really need composition. You don't need the idea. Your mind knows what it wants to do. And so it's good. I'll ask my students, do you have something you want to accomplish? And I'll do this a week or so before they get done. I'll say, what do you want to accomplish in your next project? And if they're a painter, they'll say, oh, I would really like to do a landscape with clouds. I've had a person recently ask me for that. She said, I don't care what else is in it. I just want to learn how to make really good clouds. And so we did that and we resourced it. We got lots of pictures of clouds and we studied how to put those clouds together and which clouds go together and which ones are close to the surface, which ones are higher up, and which ones are going to be sunny day clouds and which ones are going to be rainy day clouds. And we just looked at that and did a pretty good picture with clouds. Yeah, I'm good with that. That's what resources are for. They are there to help you tell the truth. When I did the pears, I looked for something that had some specific information available on the resource because I knew I wanted to be sure and include that in the pears when we did our paint along. But to put that piece that is somebody else's photograph up and say we're going to paint this, that gives a resource way too much power over your creativity. And you are much more creative than you're allowing yourself to believe. So I would rather show you how I did it and show you the end result to follow. And that's probably what I'll continue doing as we go. There may be times when I show you where I got my material. In the first painting I did of the hills in the mist, that was a personal photo that I took a year ago, last July, in the Smokies. So it was already mine. I didn't mind using it. I take a lot of pictures of fruit, and I have pear trees and peach trees and apple trees, and I take a lot of pictures of grapes and blueberries and raspberries, and I've got them to use. Sometimes I see something when I'm looking for something else. I'll see something and I'll say, you know, that really shows this. That tells this part of the story. And so I will download it or I will screenshot it. But I know that I am not going to copy their intellectual material and violate their ownership, because it's not who I am. So I'm not likely to take that resource, stick it in front of a camera and say, we're going to paint from this. With my children who like to paint animals and birds and things like that, I often will print off a picture from the internet for speed, or from my old resources. I have resources that go back to the late 80s and early 90s. So yeah, I have a lot of resource. I will print a page off. Recently we did a baby gorilla. And that's simply so that when I say, draw a line here and let's put a circle above that line. Smallish circle. See it? See it? Now put a smallish circle. And we use that resource to analyze the structure of that animal and get it onto our page. Because these are young children for the most part, I don't have to worry about them violating somebody's intellectual property. They're just not going to do it because they have their own ideas and they have not blocked the creativity in them to the point where they think that somebody else's picture is better than what they've got in their mind. That's one of the sweetest things of teaching young children. There are some things that I struggle with still in teaching young children because I was a secondary teacher for most of my public teaching career. But I love teaching young children, and I see that about it. I don't have to worry about them trying to copy this line for line and put this right here in the picture and put that right here in the picture. Recently, I started a drawing student, and when I set up her, we were drawing plastic fruit for the first session, and when I set it up, she was like, but I don't know how to draw all those lines and things that I see behind it. And I'm like, oh, well, don't. We're drawing the fruit. And she went, oh, good. Why would you think I wanted you to draw that stuff? Learn to isolate. Learn to take something out of a resource and say, I want to draw this, and this tells me the shape and the relative relationship between the leaves and the fruit, or the leaves and the flower. This gives me the basic relationship of the bear's head to his baggy body. You know, learn just to pull the truth out of a resource and let your mind play with it. And that's part of why I did the butterfly that I did. It was a purple butterfly. And it did have some reddish spots and things, but I did it completely different than the resource that I commandeered from my old files of a butterfly sitting on some blueberries. They weren't grapes, they were blueberries. And I didn't go into that in the painting. I didn't feel like that was something that I needed to dedicate myself to. I hope that you understand what I'm saying about resourcing, because I don't intend you to limit yourself to the videos that I put online. And when I do a play along, I want you to see all of the applications. I'm going to do one about waves, but understand that drawing waves is about like drawing the mountains in the Smokies. There's a whole lot of transfer between one application and another application. I have a book on teaching people to draw waves that is old. I think it was copyrighted probably in the 50s or something like that. And I may photograph what I'm doing and show you what I'm talking about some, or we may just produce those things on a paper so that you see them in action. And so I intend to do that fairly soon. Another thing I really intend to do is to teach you not to look for the color, but to create the color. You notice that I used red and blue to create a whole line of different purples for that butterfly. Everything from an almost fuchsia pinky color all the way through to a very bluish kind of a ultramarine purple. Yeah. So we'll do a lot of that. We'll do a lot of color overlay. I did that with the leaves. I wanted you to see that if you go into that yellow background and put the blue kind of wash in there, then you can come back with the yellow, then you can add a little more blue, and you can build up a nice green leaf. I wanted you to kind of see that that happened, and I hope you did. But yeah, that's where I want to go. I want to go with giving you tools to do your own thing. That's my biggie. I would like for you to do a few things for me. I would like you to ask me questions in the comments here on YouTube. If I share it on some of my other media sites, please come back to the YouTube video to ask questions. But if you put them on the videos, I have a tendency to look through my videos and look if there are comments and things. So ask me questions. Also, if you're struggling with something and you say, I would really like to learn to paint a rock dove. I have a lot of pictures of rock doves, and I can procure more. As I said, I'm not against screenshotting. I usually crop it out to the place where what I'm doing is the main thing we can see, and there are buku's pictures of every kind of bird you can imagine out there on the internet. So ask me, and we'll set it up, and I will lead you through that. Let me know if there is some subject. Now, I may not do all of them, but if I feel like I have something to teach them, I very likely will address that. Thank you for joining me in the studio. Okay, and I hope that your day is full of creative, wonderful things. And very, very soon, I will be putting out another video. And I hope you'll join me again when we play along with watercolor.